Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. Very excited. We got Dean rejoining us, and we got a new face, Eric Kingsley here. Very stoked to have you on here. Well, while I am stoked, y'all should be too. Make sure you like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff. Get your emails whenever we go live, which is, of course, every day. Now, if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, by all means, put them up in the comment section and we can engage those directly throughout the show. I don't have any yet. It's a little early, so I'm not too surprised. Now, what we're going to be talking about before we get too deep into it, resilience and transitions. Very excited to get into that one. But before we do, let's get some intros. Start with Dean. Give us 10, 15 seconds. Who are you? Where you come from? All that good stuff. And then we'll work our way down. Go for it.
Yeah, Dean Goebel, originally from Indiana. I'm a transitioning soldier from 10 Special Forces Group.
Bam. Just like that. Eric, how about yourself?
Yeah, Eric Kingsley, originally from Connecticut. I'm also with Dean Transitioning. However, I also run the transition office at 10 Special Forces Group.
Perfect. So we're going to get into this resilience and transitions. Now, I have a quick little blurb on this, and then we can dive into the conversation. And this is, I'm going to start with a quote from Heraclitus: "The only constant is change." And I think this is a very poignant point to what we're going to be talking about today. So, what is transition? The term transition refers to the process that military personnel undergo when they leave the armed forces and integrate back into civilian life. This transition can be a complex and multifaceted experience involving various aspects, such as career change, adjusting to different lifestyles, and addressing potential physical or mental health challenges. Resilience plays a crucial role in the transition from military to civilian life. The ability to adapt and bounce back from challenges and navigate uncertainties is essential during this period of significant change. Resilience is therefore a fundamental quality that supports individuals in facing the uncertainties and challenges associated with transitioning from the military to civilian life. It empowers veterans to not only adapt to change, but also to thrive and build fulfilling lives in their post military careers and communities. And that's what I got on the definition, but what are your guys' first thoughts on this? Dean, I'm going to come to you first. When you hear the words resilience and transition, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about resilience, the first thing that kind of really comes to my mind is like problem solving, because you're going to get knocked down and then you're going to have to figure it out again. You're going to get knocked down again. You're going to have to figure it out. And when it comes to transition, I honestly, I kind of think of Red from Shawshank Redemption. I don't know if you guys are a big fan of that movie, but depending on how much time you do, what does he say? You be institutionalized, so I think that to me for transition is where you can really kind of see the ability to let go because you've been doing and part of a culture for so long that it can be, it sounds so easy on paper and, you're super excited, like, hey, I'm transition, next step of my life. But at the same time, you're letting go of something you've been doing for a very long time in a culture you've been a part of for a very long time. And it's much easier said than done for sure.
Absolutely. Eric, what are your first thoughts?
Yeah, so adaptability and flexibility. I've noticed that everything we try to do or we try to do our way, and it always gets fought back. So just being flexible. We don't know this. I've never interviewed for a job in my life because I came in at 17 and a half. So, and most guys that are at that 20-year mark plus, they're in the same boat. So, trying to find that purpose and identity is the biggest crucial thing. And then, like Dean said, doing 20 years, you get institutionalized to the point where, man, you don't know the civilian world. You don't know outside. So I would say just be adaptable and flexible as much as possible. That's what it means to me. Take it as it comes. There's a lot of stuff out there, and utilize it. And utilize your time wise. Guys want to start last minute, and then it's kind of sets them up for failure.
Absolutely. Shaun, how about yourself? First thoughts?
Yeah, so I think that when just to lay the casework, when I transitioned out of Tier 1, the transition occurred in about 30 minutes, and then I had to figure out the rest myself. And I don't know how good of a job I did, but I managed to put together a few careers and do okay. But man, that was a lot of hard work. And I think that one of the aspects that I certainly never understood, and I believe a lot of veterans don't understand, is the amount of work that it takes to become successful once you leave the military, whatever successful means to you. And so it's going to be a hard slog. And the harder you work, the easier it becomes, which is something that we're all used to. But looking at these two words, resilience and transition, I think what happens is people talk about how resilient you've got to be, and that transition means this definition, or there'll be all of these phases or all of these steps or little boxes that you've got to check. But you've kind of got to tie the two words together, that you're going to have to be resilient during the transition. And maybe we can talk about that as the conversation unfolds.
Yeah,
absolutely. Actually, the first thing I wrote down here, actually, and this goes directly into what you're talking about, Shaun, here, is control. Eric, you kind of touched on it just a second ago there, is that, especially in the military, we come from this realm of controlling the environment, controlling the anything that we can control, we try to control, right? That's kind of part of the game. But a lot of times when you step out of the military, you lose that control very quickly. So let's touch on that. And what are your guys' thoughts on the control aspect or lack thereof once you step out of the game? Dean, I'm going to come to you first. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it really starts with being prepared, and comfortable with new beginnings. I like what Eric said, and we kind of preach this a lot, but when it comes to control, to me, I kind of think of like what we call cog, center of gravity that everything gravitates towards. And that is really kind of finding purpose, I think, for a lot of people who are transitioning. And so that control aspect that you mentioned is just them having purpose. So they can wake up every day and they have all the control because they know what they're trying to accomplish in life. And when you're transitioning, you can slowly start to have that fade away, and more or less the purpose that you think that you should have, you can see that slowly slip away. And so that's kind of what comes to mind. And just honestly, just being comfortable with new beginnings, I think will help you adapt, kind of overcome that. And then, of course, taking the time to prepare. I heard Shaun say that he had about 30 seconds to, transition. We're lucky enough. I think we've come a long ways in the military where, and Eric can really deep dive into that, where we're given a lot more time now to kind of really focus on what everything you need to accomplish. And there's people to support you and so many wonderful organizations that can help you out. But yeah, I think when it comes to the control aspect, that is once again way easier said than done. But it is so hard to simply just be like, yeah, I'm going to let go and try to find a whole new identity that. And then if you came in as a kid like Eric and I did, I mean, that's a whole nother, obstacle to overcome.
Absolutely. Eric, thoughts on this?
yeah, early and often. That's what I tell all the guys. If you wait to the last minute, that control that you're losing is going to be exacerbated by all the other stuff that you have to do. What I try to do is break it down to a like 2-year timeline and then have a checklist. I know, yeah, checklist nobody likes, but it also helps codify and you look and it's like those small victories. You're like, yep, got this done, got this done, got this done. So in a sense, you're actually creating your own control, even though you're losing control from the other side. And being able to decouple from that work or that job that you've had earlier than than not is going to help set you up for success. If you keep running the gun and then go and deploying and trips and I need to get this last TUI or this last school under my belt, you're going to set yourself up on the backside where you're going to be like, hey, well, now your phone's not ringing anymore. Your team's not sending you all these gifts or whatever on the team chat, and yeah, it's gonna be pretty bad for you. But losing that control, it's hard, especially in a soft community. It's bottom driven, right? So even the young guys on the team have a lot of that control on their destiny by how they plan the missions, what they're going to do with their contingencies, etc. So I get it, but early and often is the key. Come down and see one of your transition coordinators. Go to SFL tab. There's a reason why the transition office opens up for your window at 18 months if you're ETSing or 24 months if you're retiring. So you can start getting that stuff knocked out and then changing your mindset of, hey, I'm at work now, doing this military stuff, to let's start changing my vernacular to the civilian side or the corporate side, whatever it may be.
Yeah, absolutely. Shaun, where are you coming to on this?
Yeah, those are all excellent points. One of the check boxes that needs to be on that checklist is ego. And that's going to be one of perhaps the largest stumbling blocks for a lot of high performers, or a lot of fellas or men or women who are used to kind of an elite pace, or being surrounded by elite people, we'll call it. I think that it's possibly one of the biggest stumbling blocks, the ego that we have, and then transitioning into a world that is radically different than what we're used to, in the sense of who's next to our left and right. And I'm just going to paint an example that is pretty generalistic and it's pretty extreme, but it'll get the point across. You get out and you're large and in charge, and you've done a few things, and you're used to running a program a certain way, and now you're reporting to the kid who's 23 years old and has got no skin in the game and has got no interest in the game. And it's a bit disappointing. It's a bit disillusioning. And your ego versus their ego. Now you're reporting to someone who isn't mature enough to perhaps understand what's going on in the moment. And now you're getting a lot of pushback, a lot of friction, and things can go sideways pretty quickly in these kind of generalistic worst case scenarios where you're reporting to a pimply faced kid. And I know that that's a really extreme example, but this is something that can happen out there in the general world that you might be stepping into. And it all comes back to managing ego, and not just managing your ego, but being sophisticated enough to manage someone else's ego, the person in front of you who is making your life maybe a little bit difficult. You've got to find a way to manage the situation strategically and tactically so that there's more of a successful outcome. So perhaps we can talk about that as well.
Absolutely. Eric, I'm going to come to you on this one. What are your thoughts on ego?
Oh, no, I agree 100%. A lot of guys have been operating in a higher level, and then they feel that it's, almost entitled, that they should have a position of greater, when they get out. Oh, I'm going for that senior management position. I'm going for the senior consultant position, when in reality, yeah, that works great in our field, but on the outside, you have no skin in the game, like Shaun was saying. So you do have to kind of lower your pride as well and be willing to start on a lower level. I mean, naturally, we're going to work up and progress faster than most people anyways, but you have to be willing to start there as well, and lose that entitlement, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Dean, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it really comes back to like networking. I think to kind of, find you a Shaun out there. You're not the first person to transition, obviously. And so just like you did in the military when you were brand new, you had a mentor, at least hopefully you had a good one. And so transitioning is really no different. There's somebody out there who's already working in a private corporation, there's somebody's doing contracting work, whatever you feel like, position you want to move into in life after you transition. There's somebody who's probably already done it and can give you some really good lessons. And one that they're going to give you is exactly what Shaun just said. Like, hey, man, you're going to have to check that. He's like, you're going to have to come in, work on your PMP, get some education. You learn the vernacular that we speak here on the business side, other than military, and then be humble, and then, take it one step at a time, and definitely just find yourself a really good mentor who can kind of coach you along.
Absolutely. Shaun, coming back to you on this. What are you thinking?
Yeah, the other aspect is, I suppose, I've never really thought of it this way, but the fella's wisdom is making me think about it in a bit of a unique way. I wish I would have been able to put this together a few years ago so that I could say this out to the general public, or more correctly, to the general transitioning members out there. And that's, you've got to find a way to check your ego. You've got to find a way to chameleon your way into the new environment in front of you as easily as possible, so you're seeing the greatest success. So in other words, less friction, more output. But the other aspect is, and something that we're all quite good at once we're reminded of it, is we know how to improvise, adapt, and overcome, and lead. And so, I think what happens when we get out, we're just trying to lead ourselves. But the fella's making this point right now about having a mentor out there. I think maybe another way to look at it is, as we transition out, if we can really bear down and do it to the best of our ability, now we're setting ourselves up as mentors for the people who are going to be following in our footsteps. In other words, act as a fine example for the men and women who are paying attention to how you do as you transition out, so that they can be encouraged to see that, listen, this can be done to great success. It doesn't have to be as hard as everyone says. There is an optimal and efficient way to move forward, so that you're kind of like that shining beacon of hope, as it were, for others who are going to be following you months or years later. And so I think, and this is something that we're all very understanding of, we're not just serving ourselves, but we're serving the greater team around us. And perhaps during that transitionary phase, we need to kind of keep that in the back of our mind, that I'm doing this for me, but I'm also doing it for everyone who's going to be doing it after I bounce. It's just a thought.
That is an excellent thought, and I'm gonna put out a little word of warning on that one as well too, is because that can consume you in and of itself. Of trying to, I need to get sorted out so that I can help the next guy, so I can help the next guy, without taking the time to actually sort yourself out. And I think that's one of the things that I failed in when I first got out, and I immediately started working into advocacy and just like, I gotta help out the boys, I gotta help this person out, I gotta help that person out, without, and I actually utilized it as a way to proxy out my own issues by helping somebody else. Right? I didn't have to deal with mine because I was constantly working on somebody else too. So there's a line there, and I don't want to put anybody off helping out their brothers and sisters, but make sure that you got yourself squared away before you engage in that, because it does take some time. What are you guys' thoughts on that, Dean? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, like, I'll be quick, but I had a quick story with my grandfather. So my grandfather used to split wood all the time, and I was super excited to get a double-bladed axe when I was 10. And so I got one, but of course I went to town every single day out there splitting wood. And then one day he walked up to me and he kind of grabbed the axe and he was just like, "Hey, you're never going to split this wood because this axe is so dull." And since then I kind of took that as a metaphor and kind of adapted it over the years. And I tell people all the time, like, hey, sometimes you just have to stop and sharpen your own axe, or you're just not going to be effective. So if you can't split your own wood, you're definitely not going to help anybody else split theirs. So, take a moment, take a breath, step back, sit down, work on yourself a bit, sharpen your axe. And then not only will you be effective, but then if you really like to help other people, you can do that as well.
Absolutely. That's a great line, actually. I think I've heard many times the most dangerous knife is a dull one.
Yeah.
So absolutely. Eric, you got any thoughts on this?
Well, it's kind of hard to follow Dean. Thanks with that one. But no, essentially, like I was saying before, early and often, if you start early enough with yourself, by the time you get down to the process where you're 6 months, 3 months out, then you can actually have the time and availability to be able to help others. Right. So, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Just because you're doing it as well, there's probably somebody out there that's either went through the process already. Well, there's actually is a lot of people that went through the process already, but there's a lot of people that are willing to help. It's just no one wants to ask for it too. So
Yeah. That's an interesting question to get into in and of itself, is the ability to ask for help. Shaun, I'm going to come to you on this one. What are you thinking on just the getting over that hurdle?
Yeah, you're right. It is difficult for guys to reach out and ask for help. And by help, I mean not like, come and teach me how to sharpen an axe, but just the simple act of, hey man, I'm not sure what's going wrong here. Could you just give me a few pro tips, or do you have any thoughts on ... Now, interestingly enough, when I first started trying to help folks out digitally, which has only been about, I don't know, maybe 18 months, it was kind of a little slower than it is right now. By slower, I mean like some guys were kind of hearing what I was trying to do, trying to be helpful. And they were, they were trickling in to ask questions. But once it was established that, like, I don't want any money for this. I'm not doing this to sell t-shirts. I just wanted to be helpful. Once people started realizing that it was from an kind of a more genuine or more honest or authentic hope to maybe help my fellow man, then once the word got out on the street, then I'm getting contacted more and more, to the point where I'll have not constant direct messages in my Instagram, but I get contacted a lot on the regular now. And I love it, man, because I like helping people. And it doesn't take me long to help someone. It's not like a question comes in and I spend half a day on it. I mean, I can calibrate someone pretty quick. And by calibrate, I mean, like, even if I just give them 2 minutes of my time, in 2 minutes, it's almost like a week's worth of help for them. And by that, I mean, like, they just see things from a different vector. And all of a sudden, they've got a fresh set of eyeballs on the mission in front of them, or just a different way to look at things. And so, it's great to mention, reach out to someone and reach out for a mentor, or these kind of things. But the mentors out there have to, like, genuinely make themselves available, or put out an authentic message to say, hey, listen, just hit me up. It's no big deal. We're not gonna climb into bed together. We're not gonna be holding hands. We're just gonna chirp back and forth for maybe 2-3 minutes, and we're just gonna brohemo it out just for a touch, and then you're gonna bounce and you're gonna do good things, and then when things get a bit difficult, hit me up again in the near future. No problems. And it doesn't have to be like life-defining moments where someone is picking up their phone to text me, or picking up their phone to DM me, where they start getting all sweaty and nervous, and I don't know how to talk to this guy because it's going to be a really big deal. It's not a big deal. If you find the right cool dude that says, hey, just hit me up, then just hit them up. Don't sweat the details. And in pretty short order, you've got a fresh lens on things, and you can go back to kicking that ass. So I'd encourage not only everyone to find a mentor, but I'm also encouraging the mentors out there to put the word out on the street that it's no big deal to reach out to guys who've transitioned for a while and have had some minor successes, or learned more correctly the mistakes that it takes to kind of help out with some decent advice. The mentors need to kind of put the word out on the street that just hit me up, bro. It's no big deal.
Absolutely. Dean, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. One quick one would just be, research and utilize, the organizations that are built and willing and ready out there to support you. So one I work with is the Special Forces Foundation. That I absolutely love what we do, and it is a resource that that I know that Eric helps promote throughout 10th Group and throughout the regiment. But even if we're not the right fit for you, there are plenty of resources out there that you can reach out to. That, I mean, they have it together. I mean, they've been doing this a minute, and you won't be the only one. So don't feel like you're a burden by reaching out and saying, hey, what's this thing here that people keep telling me I need this certification. Reach out to them. And if, like, for our instance, if we don't know the answer, usually I call Eric, and then Eric's just like, hey, this is the answer to that question, Dean. Don't call me again. No, just kidding. So, but yeah, he's kind of like a wealth of knowledge when it comes to transitioning. So if I don't know the answer and the foundation doesn't know the answer, Eric is usually my backup plan. I immediately go to for some wisdom.
Absolutely. Speaking of Eric, what are you thinking?
Yeah, so information flow is crucial, and the lack of information flow is also critical at the moment as well. We need to start getting the word out. What you're mentioning, Shaun, is mentors need to reach out. A lot of guys don't know that there are mentors out there. As sadly as it sounds, they do 20 years. They don't know that there's actually coaches that will coach them through life and how to transition. But it's getting that word out there and that information flow. A lot of guys will stay in their bubble, right? And they have their team, they have their B team, they have their little tight knit group of guys, and they're getting what we call the barracks lawyers, telling them what you need to do, this and that, you should do this, you should do that. When in reality, it's actually setting them up for more failure on the backside. So what we try to do is get that information flow. I go knock on team room doors. I go to the battalions. I go to the companies, and I say, hey, you have these guys that are eligible for retirement, these guys that are eligible for their ETS and getting out of the military. What are you going to do about it? Have them come see me, and then try to give them as much information flow as possible. But yeah, it takes a lot to reach out, one, for you to ask help, and it takes a lot for the mentors to actually say, hey, I am here to help. So
Yeah, absolutely. We did a show a few days ago, I think maybe a week ago, and we were talking about this the particular point of, stating that you have an open door policy, right? Like, oh yeah, absolutely, got an open door, come see me. How many of those troops are actually going to come see you? None, right? And it's about going down to the bay. It's about going down to the team room. It's about going down and being, in a leadership role. That's what you should be seeking out, right? The guys. You should be seeking out the team and saying, okay, this is what's available to you. One of the things that I struggled with, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on this, when I first got out, was I didn't want to take advantage of any of the programs, because it was like, well, I'm not that bad. Like, these programs are set aside for somebody else. They let's help out that guy or this guy. And it's kind of funny. Somebody asked me at one point in time of like, if somebody were to give you an award, what would you do? And I'd be like, I'd point to that guy and be like, no, give it to him. He deserves it more than I do, right? And I think this is something that we do kind of regularly, is pass off the stuff that's set out for us in those situations. And it was my wife that picked up on this, and she was like, your grandfather, his whole generation that came out of World War II, stood up for these specific things that you are now being offered, specifically so that you could have them, because they didn't. So you should take advantage of them. And I was like, yeah, I guess you're right on that one. I probably should. So let's talk a little bit about that, and just, having the ability to, I guess, I get kind of let go of your ego again, but utilizing those tools that are set out specifically to help you. Eric, I'm going to come back to you on this one. What do you think?
Yeah, I see that 100% all the time. And it's funny you mentioned your wife, because my wife did the same thing. She's like, hey, you've done 20 years. You have these programs, use them. There is a plethora of them. I can't even name them all right now. There's hundreds of organizations out there that are benevolent, that want to give back and want to help, regardless if you've done one day or 30 years in the military. But we see that all the time. Guys are too humble to not use them, or especially with the VA benefits. And they're like, nah, I'm not broken. I'm not hurt. I'm not this. I'm not that. So they pass up a lot of opportunities. And yeah, we see it quite often in our office.
Absolutely. Dean, thoughts on this?
I think it really just comes back to, what Shaun mentioned earlier, is you just got to check the ego, and ask for that help. That's ultimately where it's going to, at the gym, we have a phrase that says, your ego is not your amigo. So, keep that in mind. Just, it is definitely something that you're going to have to lose, and then come in it real humble, and, be that person who can ask for support, especially, and I don't mean to bring us down, but especially on the mental health aspect. I don't know if we want to speak about that, but in transition and resiliency, kind of our subjects and stuff, I think what Eric and I see a lot is when people transition and start to lose that purpose, not utilizing the resources, or kind of to your point, Chance, of, saying, hey, I'm fine. They keep saying that, but they're drinking a fifth of vodka every single night, and not being able to kind of look in the mirror and just be like, hey, I should call Eric on the phone and say, hey, I'm not doing okay. Is there any resources that can help me with, mental health? Or I have a drinking problem that I feel like starting to get bad. Maybe I should just ask a professional and see if I, if there's something I should look into fixing. So.
Absolutely. Shaun, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, that's why we started this show. It's crazy, man. It's so crazy when I kind of look back on the history of this. But, I'll start. I'll make a couple of points here. My first point would be, I didn't think I was a mentor. I fought this position that I'm in right now. I didn't want to get in front of a microphone. I didn't think I had anything to say. I didn't think anything that I'd learned in my life was of any value to anyone else. And it was all of my brohemos freaking hassling me and calling me like really rude names to get in front of a microphone and start being helpful. I don't know whether it was humility or whether it was just stupidity. I'm not sure what it was, but I just didn't think I had anything to say. And as it turns out, I was incredibly wrong. But it was all of the fellas encouraging me to go and do this, based specifically on the challenges were this. Hey, bro, are you even aware of what's going on in the veteran community right now in respect to mental health and the suicide epidemic that is going on out there right now? And I shrugged my shoulders and I said no, because I wasn't aware, because I'd been out in the civilian world with other careers and I'd kind of lost touch with what was going on with my friends to some degree. And so I push back against, I'm not interested in doing any of this. But the moment that I started looking at the statistics, the moment that I started looking at the various vectors of challenges, like I couldn't unsee it. And so then I was kind of screwed. Then I kind of had to get in the game of being helpful, but I didn't know how. And I didn't think I was a mentor. So there was a period of time for me, as I'll call myself a mentor now, where I not only did I not want to do it, I didn't think I was capable of it, and I didn't know why I would do it. And so these things, to your point, Eric, these sort of fundamental whys or fundamental purposes to start helping others or helping ourselves are deep-rooted questions that you kind of have to spend time with and consider, why am I going to do this, or what is this all about? And so once I realized that, and Chance and I got talking, and we kind of came up with this idea to start helping people via a every single day live chat podcast with amazing guests that can bring the heat or bring the wisdom or bring the various subject matter expertise to talk about these things. You know, a year and a half ago, this wasn't even, I would have laughed out loud so hard that snot would have shot out of my nose. These are just not considerations for me. But now that we've been in the game for a while and just talked to so many people and starting to see how helpful it is for some folks out there, I mean, it seems like it's a really easy thing to do. And it seems like, how did I even have such a blind spot to being a mentor? Of course, I'm mentoring now, but even as I mentor, I struggle to call myself a mentor. And so I think one of the things that I face, and I think most people will face if they came up a certain way in the military, then it's hard to start doing things for yourself. And then it's hard to think that you can do these kind of things that we're doing right now for others once you're out of the military. Well, the military is an institution for sure, but it's just a construct. And that construct easily can follow you throughout your life, helping others all around you, whether they're veterans or not. But you've got to get right with the idea that if you can serve a greater cause than yourself, in so doing, you're serving yourself. You'll become a better person by trying to be a better person for others. And I know that sounds kind of, like live, laugh, love. It should be hanging above the pantry. But it's really true, man. It's really true, and it's so true. It seems to be too simple, but the fact remains. I've just seen it too many times now, interacting with others or others interacting with me. That if you can just serve your fellow man at a greater level, then you're gonna start doing okay, and then okay turns into you're doing real well, and then real well turns into now you're able to help others yourself at a much greater scale, and the scale just keeps building. So just have faith that if you put your time into helping the team around you by helping yourself and helping them in a parallel path, things will start getting pretty rosy.
Yeah, absolutely. Eric, I'm going to come to you on this one. What do you think on that?
Yeah, once you realize you're not needed anymore, things go a lot easier. I don't want to touch too much on the mental health portion, but what I see a lot of guys do is they lose that purpose identity, right? And that purpose, direction, and motivation that's been given to us this whole time. And a lot of guys, they go from making a choice. Do you want to go to North Carolina or Germany? And then you're like, Germany, and they say North Carolina. So therefore, when you're at home, hey, sorry, hon, the military's making us move. Right now, it's on the Army. It's not on you. And then they start transitioning out, and now they're making decisions, and these decisions are life changing decisions that they can choose for them and their family. What I see helps in a lot of guys that are actually successful, to touch on a good successful story, is guys that include their family members. I include my oldest daughter. She's a teenager, so we're going to stay here because she wants to finish graduating high school in a school for more than a couple years. I include my wife as well. Hey, we can throw a dart on the map. We can get a job anywhere we want to get a job. I can live anywhere we want to live at this point. What do we all think collectively, right? So that's hard for guys to actually realize and conceptualize and internalize as well, is realizing, hey, I'm a big boy now, right? What do I want to be and do when I grow up? Where do I want to move when I grow up? So it's hard for guys to get over that. But seeking out that help, or at least just talking to somebody that is either going through it or just somebody else in general, gives a different perspective and a different side of light. And I've seen that a lot. Guys will come into the office and they usually have one or two guys in there, pretty much at all times. And it's a simple one spark, might trigger something in this guy that's going on. He might, wait a minute, what did you do? What happened with you? And then it changes his whole perspective on it. And now, like Shaun was saying, his whole week's worth of planning is now complete because of one little conversation that he overheard. We try to get guys together as much as we can, having that, shared understanding and community within the transition process, because they're losing their community on the team, but now they have a community within the transition process, right? And I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. No, you're good. Yeah.
All right. I was gonna say that this is why we call it the collective. This is the whole reason, is that it's all about consolidating that information. It's about creating this room that we can have cold eye reviews on each other. And that's, I think, the key. Shaun uses this all the time, is getting a cold eye review on this. And it's one of the reasons at the end of the show, I always ask people, hey, how did that go? Is there anything we can do better? Anything we can do, work on, blah, blah, blah. Is that you got to have that, you got to have somebody on the outside looking in, rather than constantly being in, trying to look out. Like, and you can lose your way pretty quickly if you're constantly looking outside of yourself rather than right in the moment where you are right now. So it is a struggle. Do you got Dean? You got any thoughts on this?
I would say just, make sure, I think something we haven't touched on, or we might have just a tad, was just, look at yourself medically, and once again, come in a humble way. I've seen, some guys who are a few years ahead of me that they, I hear the same common story all the time. Is just, when I was in, I had a little bit of shoulder pain, everything was, and then like literally I was handed my DD-214, and like I felt my knee tweak that morning, and the next day, my back started to hurt, and he's like, I started falling apart altogether, so I think people underestimate how much your physical fitness weighs on your mental health. And so don't let that go as you transition. You won't have, the master sergeants making sure that you're on time and at the gym every day. You're, like Eric said, you're a big boy now. You need to make sure you continue some good habits. And one I would highly recommend is just find you a community, a gym that you can go to kind of keep that physical health, in check. By all means, unless you want to, you don't have to, try for the Olympics, but keep your body in check. And I think that you're going to be shocked on how much that's going to affect your mental health and kind of keep you moving in the right direction and help for a successful transition.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. Shaun, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think what we're talking about right now, Eric had just mentioned, is what is your sense of success, or what is your path forward once you're transitioning out? What does it look like for you? What do you identify as a good life, for lack of a better term? And for many individuals, it looks a little bit different, but there are certain pillars, one of them being physical health, that are critical to the idealized future for you. So as you're considering where you're going to go and what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, there are things that don't change, and certainly physical fitness is one of them. But it doesn't have to be, getting up at 05:30 hours to do burpees. It can be all kinds of things, but that's for a guy or girl to start thinking about as they're transitioning out. Look, it could be lawn bowling. It doesn't matter what it is. Maybe you saw a National Geographic show that there was some professional dart players that really kind of caught your eye. And you're fascinated by it, and so now you're in the game of maybe getting interested in dart throwing. Well, if you've got a janky shoulder that you've been ignoring for several years, and as you're transitioning out, if you've identified that you want to be a professional dart player, well, it's time to start addressing these kind of things while you're in, or at least set up a process that as you're getting out, you can address these certain medical issues that we all have or all had, depending on whether you address them or not. And so success is multifaceted. But at the end of the day, success, I think, even though it's multifaceted and it's for you to decide what success is, there are some fundamentals. Now, coincidentally, last night, I sat down with a older gentleman. He's about 80 years old, and he's a very successful businessman. He owns some large sports teams, and he owns a lot of commercial real estate, and he's done a lot of things in his life. And I got to spend just over an hour with him last night, talking about things. And as is my way, I was trying to understand how his mind worked. I was trying to learn more from him. I was seeking wisdom from him rather than trying to hand out my 2 cents of wisdom back at him. And so I asked him a few key questions, and I asked him specifically, hey, listen, if you've got any wisdom that you could pass on to a younger generation, what would it be? And so, I'm not going to relay what he told me, but they were all very fundamental things. And I think that the fundamentals get lost in the conversation because we tend to seek not the sexy stuff, but we tend to see the visualized outcome that looks like, it's magnificent. But at the end of the day, the process, the fundamentals within a process, if you just keep chipping away at a consistent basis on the regular, the process will get you to the outcome that you want. And so you can't drop the fundamentals, the process of the military that made you maybe special operations. You can't drop that stuff the moment that you're transitioning out. The process is what created you into an amazing human being. And so you've got to retain that process once you're out. Retain it for a while until you can start adjusting or recalibrating it to the specifics of whatever new industry you're in or whatever entrepreneurial career pathway that you're in. You'll figure that out a couple of years from now, but don't let any of the fundamentals slip, because to this older gentleman's point, who again, successfulness is in the eye of the beholder. I would consider him as a successful individual. If we're talking about a monetary aspect, the fundamentals at all levels are the same. It's how you apply them with consistency and the understanding that the process will get you to where you need to be.
Yeah,
Chance, can I jump on that real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. Give her.
Yeah, if you don't mind. So, I mean, when Shaun was talking, it reminded me of a story, and I think Eric was there too. We bring in the Donovan Bank Foundation and stuff, and Paul and his team do a wonderful job of help coaching and mentoring some of us who are transitioning. But a story that he told was really kind of captured, me, and I'll always remember it is, kind of, and it touches on our subjects on resilience and transition. But he was talking about a successful business person who, time and time again, he knew his skills that he was given within the special operations community, and he tried and tried and tried again, and kind of just, he got knocked down, tried again, got knocked down. And then one day, kind of like to Shaun's darts analogy, he was just like, somebody asked him, he's like, well, what are you passionate about? He's like, well, I like making my own liquor. That's what I want to do. Just my skills that I have, says that I have to do this though, because those are the skills I got. And and as Paul was telling that story, he was like, this is where he's like, I knew I made my mistake. He's like, I wasn't passionate about what I was doing. I was just doing it because it was what I felt like I was good at. But at the end of the day, if I applied the same principles, I could be good at anything and I could pick something that I was passionate about. And then at the end, he was mentioning now, like, he's the president and founder of Tito's Vodka. So a guy who literally had absolutely nothing to do with, he just liked to do it as a hobby, but he applied those same principles just to a different, craft. And he was successful and then happy because he was doing what he liked to do. And so I would definitely, I don't ever really consider myself a mentor, but helping those, in need, I would say definitely look at, make you a list of things you're truly passionate about, because you'd be surprised that you probably already have the skills, or the majority of them, the principal ones you'll need to be successful. You just got to find the passion portion, and then I think that's where you're really going to take off.
That is a fantastic point. Eric, you got any thoughts on this?
Just something real quick. Like Dean was talking about the Donovan and Bank Foundation. There's plenty of organizations out there that will do workshops. We run them here on Carson at 10th Group all the time, pretty much every quarter, if not every month or two. And they give you tools and resources in order to find your peace, contentment, balance, or your, what drives success for you, what makes you happy and what makes you tick, right? There's a lot of things out there that we don't realize that are jobs that you can make money at. You just have to seek it out, and they'll help you kind of extrapolate that as well. So if guys are having issues trying to figure it out on their own, these organizations will help you with that and help define what that success and purpose is for you. And they will give you a mentor or a coach for 14 months, 9 months, 12 months, whatever it may be, from the time that you seek them until the day you get out of the military. And then you have them for life as well. I know a lot of guys who get out and they have their stepping stone job. To touch on what Dean was saying, I have to do this. My credentials and my skills call me to do this. Well, in reality, if you look at the fundamentals, like Shaun was talking about, you actually have a lot more fundamental skills or intangibles that you cannot teach people. Right? You have those skills, but you have to get over the fact that I can shoot, move, communicate, first aid, PT. You can do a lot more than that, right? And until you do that, then you will be kind of pigeonholed and stipend down these other jobs that maybe are stepping stones or ones that you're not really happy at, right? But I see a lot of guys that do. I think that average is like 70 to 80% of guys have 2 to 3 jobs their first couple of years out of the military, because they didn't find that success and they didn't find happiness or what makes them tick, right? You might have a job where maybe it's not the best job, but you have time off with your family, you have great hours, and the money is there, and the location is perfect, and everything else on the outside is what you need. That's fine too, right? You don't have to find everything within inside of that job necessarily. It's just you focusing on the journey, not the end state necessarily, and what's going to help you get to that journey. And it's these small little stepping stones and small victories that's going to allow you to actually be more successful on the backside.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. When I first started doing advocacy, I remember talking to a lot of guys that struggled with, I'm a machine gunner. How is that skill transfer to anything? And the concept that I always try to get people to think around is, what does a machine gunner skill set look like? Is it just pulling a trigger? No, it's, target acquisition, the ability to find ground, the ability to all these things, timeliness, and you can break that down into a myriad of skills, and it just goes back into, what did we get taught right at the very beginning, going through training? Keep working, right? And to not compare yourself to the guy next to you, because somebody might have, when Shaun went through, he said he was a pretty good shot because he spent most of his time hunting as a kid, right? He has that skill set built in. Whereas I know people that first got into the military who've never touched a rifle in their life, right? And so to compare or contrast yourself, especially getting out of the military, with somebody that's been out for 10 years or been out for 5, or has found that passion or has found that skill set that really works for them, it can be demoralizing. But to your guys' point, I think the key is to really just break down the skill sets. What do I need to work on? And at the very core of everything we got taught was the resilience to keep going. And I think that is a key one. And there's a quick little story here, and then I'm going to get your thoughts on this. Was, as I was getting out, I had a friend of mine tell me, when you go see the doctor for your final medical, tell him every ache and pain and little finicky anything that even slight annoyance, make sure it's on paper. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'll do that. And I went in there, I talked to the doctor and gave him all the list of things that hurt. And he looked at me and he's like, how are you walking, let alone teaching? Like, this doesn't make any sense. Your knees and your back and your shoulders and all these things. And it came down to, again, that concept of within the team room, within the platoon room, within the group of people, we all kind of understand, right? We all have oh, your back hurts because we were rucking for the last 3 days straight, right? Oh, okay, that makes sense. But we don't verbalize that as we get out. And I think it works in the same concept of skills and the same concept of mental health and the same concept of everything, is that we kind of assume that others understand. And as soon as you get out of the military, nobody understands, because nobody's been in there unless they're a veteran or a mentor or something like that. So I want to get your guys' thoughts on how do we get others to be more vocal about the issues that they're going through, about the struggles that they're having, about the spots people don't want to talk about. How do we get them to talk about it? Let's start with that. Dean, I'm going to come to you first. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it starts with yourself being vulnerable first. I think so I'm a suicide prevention advocate, so it's a topic that I take very seriously and I research, and by no means am I a professional like therapist, but I try to know and understand it. But I noticed when I was struggling with suicide, it took me a while to realize that the more vulnerable I became, the more able that I was or the more able I was to show others that it was also okay to be vulnerable and ask for help. So I think it really starts with providing that example, especially younger people, because, if you would have talked to, Dean of, 10, 15 years ago, I would have never admitted to any of that. I would have told you I was fine every single time. My back, might have hurt, but there's no way I would have ever admitted that to somebody of power. I would have been like, I am perfectly fine and capable. Send me. But obviously that comes with the years of, experience and, just maturing, that took me a little longer, I think, than most to mature. But yeah, once I kind of hit that point and I realized that I was me, providing example by being vulnerable. Like there was a time that I was going to behavioral health, almost, on a weekly basis. And I would announce it to the team, like, hey, like if you guys have anything you need signed or support with the con ops or whatever, I'll be back in an hour because I'm going to behavioral health, to go and kind of work on my mind, and get some help. I think that, I hope that showed the younger guys that, well, if Chief's going, then it should be okay for me to go and get some help. So I think it begins with, becoming vulnerable and providing that example.
Absolutely. Eric, thoughts on this?
Yeah, Dean, you hit the nail on the head. And Dean being a man of great influence within groups, so everybody knows who Dean is. And having guys like that actually voicing and their vulnerabilities and voicing their issues and concerns that they're having has a huge role in it. A lot of guys have a stigma about mental health. I'm not going to be able to own my guns. I'm not going to be able to continue this job, X, Y, and Z, right? But getting that information out there that it is okay to seek help and it is fine, especially with guys like Dean that are in, have a great sphere of influence around amongst the younger generation, is imperative. These guys don't realize that I still have a concealed carry. I still carry a gun all the time. I still have a TSSCI clearance. Yet I'm going to behavioral health all the time, right? I'm going to seek guidance. I'm going to get myself better, because on the latter side, it's going to turn into something even worse, whether it be suicidal ideations, you hurting yourself or others. And it's just going to, you're going to implode. And then eventually when it does come out, it's going to be, almost too far to where you can't turn back from it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Shaun, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm going to get to it in a sec, but I got to go back to the comment about Tito's vodka. And there's a reason for that, because, we were talking about having some passion in life, and being curious is also critical to that. if you have a curious mind or you have an adventurous spirit, which we all have to have, and particularly in special operations, your adventurous mind or your adventurous spirit, some curiosity and some passion can take you in different locations, different unique industries. And that's how I ended up high performance race coaching for 15 years, looking after ultra endurance athletes all around the world. We were living in Texas for 2 years. My wife was a professional engineer running a big team down there just outside of Houston. So during those 2 years that we were down there, Tito's Vodka was a little nobody business that was kind of like going from shopping mall to shopping mall and giving out samples. I remember reading the Genesis story of it and thinking, wow, I wonder if he's going to do okay. But, you know, like presto changeo, started smashing. And that curious passion can take you in some pretty interesting places like it did for him. And I think these kind of stories are amazing to pass around, because as he was coming up in vodka, I was coming up in ultra endurance coaching. I never saw that ever happening in my life. I didn't think I'd ever do that as long as I did. Again, snot would have shot out of my nose on any of the 8 careers that I've now had. If someone would have said, hey, guess what? That's what you're going to be when you grow up, I would have laughed. But I've been open-minded and curious and adventurous and passionate about the things that I do. And it takes you places, just like it took Tito. So I think that's a really cool story, and thanks for passing it along. Going back to being vulnerable on mental health and letting everyone know that it's okay to be vulnerable, transparent. And this has already been said. I think it's cool to demonstrate leadership by showing these kind of attributes of being transparent and vulnerable and open on these subjects. Where I think it goes a little wrong is that someone will say, yeah, you know, I'm a little broken, I'm going to go fix myself. Well, that's not the case. It's you're going to go make yourself better. The relentless pursuit of excellence should be in everyone's hip pocket. And so, you know, Dean going off to hang out for an hour and work on his mind, I just hear as that's a dude who's in the game of being better, not a dude who's in the game of fixing his brokenness. And the messaging sometimes out there gets flippity flopped into, well, he's broken, he's trying to fix himself. But I don't see it that way. I see that as a guy who's awesome and is pursuing betterment. So the language, I think, kind of has to change on that aspect of, if someone's going out to do any kind of counseling, that's becoming a cooler person. That's becoming a better human being, not anyone's being fixed. And so that language, I think, really has to change. And so the other piece would be, I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't say it. For up until just about 2 years ago, I'd never talked about anything in regards to suicide. I've never had any suicidal ideations myself. But when I was a teenager, I was about 16 years old, I had a younger brother who killed himself due to bullying. We were both being bullied, and he took that direction. And I'd never openly spoken about that. My own kids, my own boys had never heard about it. I just didn't talk about it to anyone because of the stigma attached, or I just thought it was my thing to work out and figure out how to communicate that with myself. So I didn't chirp about it at all. But I've come to realize that that was a bit of a disservice out there, that, you know, it's not that I openly talk about it. This is not my weekly spiel. I just don't do that. I rarely speak about it. But when I do, it's only for the reason that I'm trying to normalize the fact that either as leaders or as mentors or as strong individuals that people sometimes pay attention to for advice or for guidance or for how's a better way to run your life. I think we have to be more open about these conversations where we can demonstrate our vulnerability on these tougher subjects that a lot of people don't like to address in the open. And I'm not going to say normalize it, but start a conversation that is more comfortable for the people around us maybe in the future, because it's still a freaking uncomfortable conversation for most people to talk about suicide or suicidal ideation. And so the more that we can kind of put the word out that these kind of conversations have to occur a little more frequently, hopefully it'll put us in a better place in the very near future.
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing that I guess we're a little bit short on time here, but I want to get your guys' thoughts on this is that one of the things that not only I've said and I've heard from many other people is that if you truly care about the teams, if you truly care about the military, you truly care about your country, you care about service, the best service you can do is to be a successful example afterwards, right? The best recruiting tool for the military is a successful veteran. The best recruiting tool for therapy or any type of mental health struggles is somebody who has transitioned successfully into something else, right? Like if you can work through something and become successful on the other end, whatever that looks like, that I think is the best recruiting tool in getting other people to do anything. As you guys are saying, lead by example, right? So we are just over time right now. First off, Eric and Dean, super thankful to have you guys here. This has been a fantastic conversation. I think this is we've hit on a lot of points here that are going to help a lot of people. Any final thoughts on anything that we've gone over so far, or anything left still bubbling away in the back of your head? Eric, I'm going to start with you. What are you thinking?
No, just be humble, flexible, and adaptable. And if you guys are here in Fort Carson, come see me. I'll be more than willing to help. Dean as well. but yeah, just enjoy the process. You're getting out, and it's going to be great on the outside. Think positive. Thanks.
Absolutely. Dean, any final thoughts?
I'll quickly disagree with Shaun. I think we do have to normalize talking about suicide. And I was in the exact same boat. You know, I lost my father and a couple uncles to suicide, and it took me a very long time to speak about it publicly. But it's one of those things now. If I see somebody struggling, I'll come up and I'll ask them directly, and I'll make them uncomfortable. And they may not like it, but hopefully it'll save them. So, but as far as the general topic we talked about, yeah, I think Eric nailed it. You know, be comfortable with new beginnings. I would say, you know, when it's time, it's time. You know, like be willing to let go, and then definitely rely on networking and mentorship. I think we touched on all of those, but that's what was really helpful for me was being able to reach out to those who've already done it and kind of ask them for advice and support. And they were always more than willing to come in and say, "Hey, I only have 5 minutes, but what do you got? Let me help you." And so, yeah, and then just stay positive and check that ego.
Absolutely. Shaun, final thoughts?
Yeah, Dean just phrased it there. I'm with him on that normalization aspect. So we see eye to eye on that, buddy. Good job. So on kind of wrapping up on transitioning and the general theme that we've been hitting on today, you know, I'm looking at these two guys on the guest panel right now. So well spoken, educated, intellectual, hold their space well. Obvious examples of great leadership. And, that I'm not going to say it's rare, but it's not as common as it could be. And I think that it could be more common simply by looking to two guys like this and trying to emulate how they hold their space, how they lead, how they speak, how they put their points across. It's easy to do once you start making an effort to emulate this kind of excellence, this kind of presentation style, this kind of how you hold your space. Most of the guys that I used to work with were all capable of doing this, but some of them don't, simply because it's homework. It is a process that you have to remain engaged in. You have to practice. You have to demonstrate through consistency that you can operate at this kind of a professional, academic, intellectual level where you then become a shining example for others around you. And that's how this thing builds, is by doing your best, doing your homework, staying in the game, pursuing the excellence that we all have within us and demonstrating it to others to encourage them to follow in, not our footsteps, but follow in the footsteps of the great people who helped us along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. We got it on a mug. Do your best, right? This is the whole point. Now, I just want to touch on these real quick before we shut her down. I didn't get to any of the comments because this was such a great conversation. I didn't want to interject in any way. But Vanessa, good morning. Good to see you. Jason is in here. Word up. Good to see you, buddy. Satch and Mosin, good morning. Daniel Labonte, good morning. And Kenneth Rose finished us off. So much gold. Thanks for sharing, everyone. Really do appreciate the conversation. I don't have really anything to add to anything that's been said already, other than I will say this. Continue, just like while you were serving, continue outside of it to learn, to build, and to grow every day. And you can do that with us here on The Collective. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Chimo.
Chimo.